Hello there. The Deputy Prime Minister Dominic Raab has suggested that low-level offenders could drive fuel tankers. What could possibly go wrong? No, it's all right. It's not a tanker. It's just Nigel Farage out looking for fuel again. As per usual, please like, subscribe and comment below. And when subscribing, please do press that little bell, but also select the all option, or you won't get any notifications when I publish a new video. Now, before I get into the meat of this video, I do have to point out that the newspaper is reporting that UK petrol hauliers have now got more drivers than petrol tankers. Let that sink in for a moment. Where did they all materialise from? Mars? Wonder if we can put that one down to the benefits of Brexit, and I wonder if the BBC will report on it. Anyway, as a result, the government has rolled out the reserve tanker fleet to give these extra drivers something to actually drive. And if the petrol crisis continues, then it must be down to panic buying and not the claimed Brexit-driven shortage of tanker drivers. Stick that in your collective Ramona tailpipes. Not only that, the report also says that we have a shortage of 100,000 other HGV drivers. And given that official reports put the figure of fewer than 10,000 EU lorry drivers leaving the country after Brexit, then where are the other 90,000? Mars? Venus? Helping Santa at the North Pole? And as a result of this shortage, the Deputy PM Dominic Raab wants hauliers to employ low-level offenders on community service to plug the driver gap. Give them skin in the economy and they won't reoffend, says Raab. Not sure how the established HGV drivers will take to that, especially when they arrive to either make or take a delivery, with people checking for their wallets and the cash registers while eyeing them suspiciously. Humans can be very human and very unkind over these things at times. But then again, back in July this year, the PM Boris Johnson was talking about having criminals in high-vis jacketed chain gangs labouring around the country, and you're going to see more of that, he said. And then there's his Pay Back London as well. Sounds like he's been chatting to his deputy in the last couple of days, doesn't it? So what's being proposed now? Convicts in high-vis, broad-arrowed prison jackets chained to the steering wheels of HGVs? Are we to end up with newly released low-level offenders driving large tankers filled with explosive fuel? Can't for the life of me think of any potential threat to people's lives from this brilliant idea. And who gets to define low-level offender? I'm sorry, but there are people in society who, in the interests of public safety, should not be allowed anywhere near anything bigger than a pushbike, let alone be given the keys to a fuel tanker. But I'm sure there'll be a choir of woke snowflakes demanding equal representation and diversity in low-level offender fuel tanker drivers. You can imagine the advice a young budding lorry driver would get from their careers officer, can't you? First you do a minor crime, then some time, and then you'll be fast-tracked into the lorry cab. And there are basic things to consider, like insurance cover, for example. And will these drivers have to be monitored more closely, more for their own protection against false accusations than for something they might do themselves? Now, there will be prison reformers and probation experts out there who would support this, and yes, it might well suit some offenders to a T. But surely this has been looked at before, hasn't it? And if so, it must have been rejected, or it would already be happening. And how long would it take to implement it? Months? Maybe a year or more? But sadly it would only take one crash causing damage and injury or one large theft for the whole thing to end up as the hottest of political hot potatoes. And it's also been reported recently that we've got about 500,000 qualified HGV drivers in the country, but nearly half of them are no longer in the cab. So just pay them. But consider this. Who is more powerful in the country right now? MPs sat in the House of Commons or lorry drivers sat in cabs? What if they stopped sitting in those cabs? When politicians take a couple of weeks off, nobody notices. But if HGV drivers went on strike for better pay and conditions, people would notice day one. And what's the government's response? To find another pool of cheap labour inside the prisons instead of forcing companies to pay proper wages and give better working conditions. More of that cheap labour Ponzi scheme that developed during our EU membership. But before I get into that, I just want to say a massive thank you to all my Super Thanks, Patreon and PayPal supporters, as well as those that do buy a mug with my mug on it. Links in the descriptions box below, and I put up 2 videos most days. Here we are after Brexit, and we are already seeing a move upwards in wages. Earlier this month, the ONS reported that total pay, including bonuses, had risen by 8.3% and basic pay by 6.8%, as predicted by Brexiteers and scoffed at by Ramonas. And the HGV driver shortage had started to push wages up too. And now we suddenly see a situation arise where big business can no longer just open a new box of cheap labour. The open border access to that has been all but closed. But instead of putting wages up to attract people back into the industry or get new people in, we ended up with drivers being asked to drive further and put more hours in, as well as businesses being quite happy to let the shelves empty and the forecourts dry up so they could, in my opinion, try and force the government to reopen the UK borders to cheap labour and keep that profit margin high. And to back that up, how come the shortage suddenly arrived last week out of nowhere, 9 months after we finally broke free of the shackles of Brussels in January? No, those under 10,000 EU lorry drivers that left the UK didn't all leave last Monday, did they? And on the back of that HGV driver shortage, the calls for open borders is raucous once again. But as we've seen, we've now suddenly got more drivers than tankers. We have a UK population verging on 70 million people, but the answer is always more people. We have a cheap labour productivity Ponzi scheme in this country. And I call it a cheap labour productivity Ponzi scheme because it doesn't matter how large the population gets, according to big business, we never have enough people. The population is neither skilled nor productive enough to service itself, hence the continual need to spiral the population numbers up. But nothing changes when we do bring in supposedly skilled workers. No, the cry goes out for even more workers. And this is just stupid and unsustainable. And nothing will change until we learn to live within our population means. Educate properly, and not just for diplomas. Train properly, upskill properly, and automate where at all possible. Either that, or start building on the green belts now and be done with it. So what's your opinion on using offenders to drive HGVs? Please like and comment below.